session and realized it was like taking too much time. So let's get going because we have to pack in two things today. I'm Doug Sershin. I'm going to be talking about the ARTA program. Louise?
Hi, I'm Louise Edwards. I use she, her pronouns, and I work in the undergraduate fellowship office, and I'll be talking to you about the Fulbright program.
The U.S. Student Fulbright program is for anyone who has a bachelor's degree, but you can be an undergraduate graduating or a graduate student. If you're a graduate student at Fulbright, you'll be working with an office in the Office of International Affairs, right?
Yeah, so we work specifically with undergraduate students or students who have graduated with a bachelor's from Ohio State, and then the Office of International Affairs works with master's and PhD students who are interested in applying to Fulbright.
But your presentation will be, it's the same program. It'll be the same information.
Yeah.
All right, so let's leap into ARTA. First of all, I hope you all know me either by, I don't know, reputation or me lumbering through the building or emails. I don't have the same kind of polished presentation that Louise has. It'll be embarrassing for me, but I have a lot of information. And I am here in the building, so you can always hunt me down and set up a meeting with me if you want to get more information about the architecture research travel, or if you want to be connected with the right folks. Why are we having this info session? We did one a year ago, and it was long overdue. We've had the architecture research travel programs around for something like 15 years. Architecture isn't a title, but it's open to all students. And I've been working with it, coordinating it for a long time. We used to have presentations for ARTA winners at the big stairs in the autumn, and we tried to present those as being info sessions as well, but they were terrible as info sessions. And so last year, we did an actual dedicated information session, and it resulted in a large number of really high quality applications. So we're doing it again. It's overdue, but there's also another reason why we need to be doing these info sessions. And this is something you just don't hear a lot at Ohio State. We happen to have a lot of money in the ARTA program to hand out. That is just not the norm. The reason we have a lot of money to hand out is that the Architecture Research Travel Awards are funded by a pot of money that resides with the Columbus Foundation. And there was an anonymous donor that provided that money years ago. That individual is deceased, and the money must be spent down. And there's like several $100,000 in that pot of money that has to be spent. We used to be able to only hand out 3 or 4 ARTA awards a year. Last year, it was something like 15. Okay? This year, it will probably be something similar to that. So I can't say that anyone who applies is going to get an award, but the odds are much better now than they were years ago. So it's a really good time to be taking advantage of this. The money will run out sometime in the next 5 or 6 years, and the program will go away. But for the time being, it's there, it's well funded, and if you take it seriously, you have a good shot at being funded to be able to go to projects and so on. I want to mention the Director's Travel Prize. Somebody brought that up earlier before we started meeting, and I've gotten some emails about it. There is no Director's Travel Prize. There was funding made available for that by Dorothy Ann. She was director. That funding is no longer available, and so no money. Director's Travel Funds. ARTA and the Director's Travel Prize can function very similarly. Okay, it used to be, and some of you may have heard this, that graduating students could not apply for ARTA. That is not the case any longer. That was changed last year. Director's Travel Prize was available for graduating students, so that's no longer a difference. The one big difference is that the Director's Travel Prize was available for non-U.S. citizens, but ARTA is only available for U.S. citizens, just like Fulbright. That is a stipulation that was put forth by the donor. We don't have control, so you have to be a U.S. citizen. But you can be a graduating student, you can be an undergrad student, you can be a grad student. It funds 75% of travel expenses, similarly to how the Director's Travel Prize was funded. And again, there's quite a bit of money to be handed out. So, and if you've got an ARTA in the past, you can apply again. So it's too bad about the Director's Travel Prize, but ARTA remains a viable option for most all students. What is ARTA for? And you've probably seen this if you've gone to the website that talks about ARTA. It funds independent travel and research initiatives for up to 30 days that could be domestic or international. So I'm going to stress a few words there. Most ARTA grants historically have been international, but they don't have to be. So keep that in mind. I don't know if we've ever actually had an ARTA proposal that proposes like a project in the United States and Canada, or the United States and Mexico. We could do that. There's no downside to proposing that, even if most of the elements are international. So don't get hung up on it needing to be an international trip. Independent research. Okay, we often have requests from students who might be doing a travel program. Maybe they're going to Europe in a May term program, and they want to see if ARTA can help support that travel. The answer is no, because that's not really an independent travel experience. You could, if you're going to be in Europe or Asia or another part of the world on a program like that, you could propose that your ARTA trip happen after that, so you kind of leverage the fact that you're already traveling. That is perfectly acceptable. But it can't be sort of part of a group trip. Yeah?
I was thinking about doing exactly that, and John Bullock recommended that I ask if it's better or not to mention that. Like, that's what my plan might be, to do the study abroad and then continue past the ARTA.
Oh, you should mention it because we're going to be wondering, like, why are you already in Istanbul or something?
Okay.
So yeah, go ahead. That's perfectly fine. There are also sometimes group proposals that come in. 2 or 3 people will put a proposal together. Okay, that could be, that's not necessarily a strength to any proposal because how is it still independent research? I would suggest that if anyone's thinking of working with someone else on a dual or triple proposal, you may be going to the same place, but you might be doing individual research projects once you're there. Maybe you're a landscape architecture student and you're going to go with a planning student or an architecture student, and you're each kind of working the same theme, but from a different perspective, right? So there are ways for a group trip to still focus on every individual in some sense. So it's truly sort of aligned with the spirit of what the project, what the program is all about. After you get an award, you do have to give a public presentation at the school. We'll work with you on that. One of last year's winners is going to be on Landscape Architecture Co-op next semester. I have to communicate with that person and we have to figure something out. We'll probably do some sort of a recorded Zoom thing and do it that way. We normally would do these presentations in the autumn. We had like 15 of them to do, and I couldn't get it wedged into the calendar. We can't do it in one just like marathon session. Fall asleep. So I think we're going to do them the week of January, the short week of January 20th, Martin Luther King holiday week, probably on Thursday and Friday, a week before the ARTA application deadline on January 30th. So stay tuned about that. But I would say if you want to get a heads up on what other students have done, you can go to this ARTA page. There's a link on the page, the Watch ARTA recipients present their research, and that will pull up this playlist of presentations that goes back more than a decade that will show you what former ARTA winners have done over the year going back to 2014. Students have gone all over the world, and I think that'll just give you a sense of the kind of research projects that have been funded in the past. As soon as we get the dates lined up in January, this is going to become a much longer list because of the 15 proposals that'll be recorded. I mentioned eligibility, and let's talk a little bit about the process. If you go to the ARTA page and you click on application requirements and instructions, it's going to take you to this page that shows you the application application deadline, and walks you through what has to go into a proposal technically in terms of its format. It talks about needing to be a U.S. citizen and presenting in the academic year after you travel. So the eligibility requirements are relatively vague, right? There's nothing in particular you have to be studying. You do have to be a student here, Ed. Someone reached out who's a minor here, and that doesn't count. You can be a graduating student, but you cannot have already graduated. So if you're graduating this December, you're not going to be able to apply because you will be a student next semester. Okay? If you're graduating in the spring or later, no problem whatsoever. So there will be presentations probably on the big stairs. We're working out some of the kinks on that. The Martin Luther King Day holiday week. Applications will be due on January 30th. Decisions are going to be made by the end of February. The executive committee, the director of the school, and the section heads get all of the proposals, and they decide who gets funded. And then you travel over the summer. So how does it work? How does the money flow? And then I have an update on that, because I think this year there were some challenges on how the money flowed to students, and I think that's an historical problem that I hope we will be able to overcome moving forward. ARTA supports up to 75% of your travel, lodging, and meal expenses only. As it says on the website, it does not fund equipment, materials, clothing, gear, etc. So the kinds of things that students will sometimes put in their budgets, they want a backpack, they want a drone, they want a camera, they want a plane. You may need those things for your research proposal, but ARTA cannot pay for it. Okay? If you get an award, what will happen is you'll get an email from the director saying, congratulations, your proposal to this part of the world has been funded, that your maximum award amount is X. And then you're going to need to set up a meeting with one of our fiscal staff at the school, either Steve Smith, who's our fiscal officer, or Jamie Underwood. Did anyone in the room today, did any of you travel on that Mexico City trip that architecture did in September? You did that? No one else will know what we're talking about here, but you had to meet with like Jamie Underwood. You had to talk to our fiscal staff about we had to do what was called a spend authorization for you, so that.
We didn't meet with them.
No, but I guess we worked through Pablo.
Oh, okay.
But there was a process by which every individual traveler on that trip had what is called a spend authorization set up for them, so that your airfare and your lodging and everything could be accounted for separate from your OSU student account. Okay. Historically, a problem with ARTA reimbursements has been the money. We would ask the Columbus Foundation to reimburse students for the cost of their travel or the cost of their lodging, and that money would go into your OSU accounts, and it was beginning to affect some students' financial aid awards. I can't do anything about that. The students could talk to the bursar's office and tell them that this money was not a scholarship to help me pay for my tuition. This was for a completely separate summer travel program. But by separating the money flow in the same way we did for the trip to Mexico City in September, it should completely separate that from your accounts, and it should not mess up payments financially.
Did I catch this right? You don't get the money beforehand, you're reimbursed?
That is correct.
Okay.
You are reimbursed. However, let's say you get an award at the end of February. You meet with Steve Smith in March. You go through your budget. We create a spend authorization for you. You buy your airline ticket right away. We will reimburse you 75% of that airline ticket. Okay. Sometimes people will prepay for some lodging. That's 50-50. sometimes people will just pay for that as their travel, right? So we will reimburse you for things that you prepaid for that fall under the categories that ARTA supports before you leave. And then otherwise, as soon as you get back, money in. But we will work with our fiscal team. You'll have to keep receipts. You don't have to keep receipts for meals because you get a per diem for those expenses, but for your lodging and transportation, you will. The other thing that the fiscal team will work with you on is really making sure that you're thinking holistically about what falls under these categories. You might need immunizations, you might need a visa, okay? That all falls under your travel expenses. That's legitimate, reimbursable, 75% reimbursable expenses. Are you getting a Metro Pass? We have a student who did a domestic trip. She used her own car, was going to drive out to Western United States, and did not estimate the cost of gas. Well, that's a lot of money if you're driving out west, and that matters, right? So it's not just your airfare to your operation, whatever. It's all of your individual transportation that you're going to be doing while you're on this trip. So we are there to make sure that your fiscal staff is there to make sure that your estimated budget is accurate and that it includes things that you can get reimbursed for, but it's also you're thinking about all the things that you might not have realized that you could get reimbursed for. This is a difference to how it's worked in the past. So it really will be important for you to meet with the fiscal staff right after you get an award. I would even encourage you to meet with those folks before you submit your proposal if you want them to look at your budget. You can meet with me as well. So I'd be happy to meet with all of you individually to talk about what you're thinking about proposing, read drafts of your proposals if you're interested. But the fiscal stuff will matter. It's Ohio State, so it's very bureaucratic. But it should work better in the future than it has in the past because we will make sure that you get reimbursed in a way that doesn't affect your own account. Okay. I want to just end by talking a little bit about what might make your ARTA proposal competitive. And this should lead in to a wonderful segue that I have planned for Fulbright as well. Some of you are undergraduates, some of you are graduate students. And I don't want the undergraduate applicants to think that their research proposal might be disadvantaged because you're also in the same pool with grad students. I think it's more that if you're a graduate student and you're submitting a proposal, it's going to be expected to be somewhat more polished or advanced than a graduate student would. Again, there's a lot of money in the ARTA pool this year, so I think that the executive committee that reviews these is looking for different things. They will expect a master's student to have a more kind of three-dimensional research project necessarily for an undergrad, but you're not going to be disadvantaged as an undergrad. It's really saying, well, some might have more advanced research that you're doing. So don't worry about that. I would, as you're putting together a proposal, please be thinking about if your proposal comes across as being like active or passive in nature. So what do I mean by that? And this comes up a lot. Are you proposing to go somewhere to observe or to visit? Or are you going there to research, to study, to measure, to interview? I'll say this later, but ARTA is not a sort of subsidized vacation. Even if it's aligns with things that you're really interested in or have been researching, it is meant to be an active research project. And so you need to present your proposal as something that has work involved in it. And one way of doing that is, and one way to display to the executive committee your seriousness and your commitment to your proposal is showing that you've actually done work in advance of getting the award. You're going to say something like, if I get ARTA, I will reach out to NGOs in this country or people at this university or at this firm or at this Botanical Garden or wherever and set up interviews. Do that now. Reach out to those people this winter and say, hey, I'm going to be applying for this grant. If I get the grant, I will be traveling in May or June. Would I be able to come by and interview as part of this research project? And then when they say, sure, no problem, list that in your proposal. List the names of faculty at the university that you've talked to help polish your proposal. You should do that. You should be working with faculty here, but it's a big university. There will also be individuals elsewhere on campus who may have expertise in the areas that you're interested in that you can set up just a quick Zoom call with, or you can come to their office hours and ask them their feedback and list their names in your proposal as well. That shows to the executive committee that you're really thinking about this. Even without any guarantee of funding, you're already doing some of the work that will be required anyway to do this thing. Yes, question?
Yeah, so if we are going to interview people, do we have to submit anything ahead of time to get approved for questions?
No.
Okay.
We don't play any role in micromanaging what the research is that you're doing. The only thing that we really do in advance, other than you might get feedback from the committee while they're reviewing proposals. They will do this sometime. If they look at your proposal and they're like, we like this idea, we think it's too much. This person says that they're 5 countries in like 3 weeks. Maybe they should pare it down to just 3. So they may ask you to modify aspects of your proposal during the award process. But once it's been awarded, no one's really going to get into the weeds regarding what they're going to do. We will work with the Office of International Affairs to make sure the university knows that you're traveling, that your travel has been registered. So if something were to happen, they know that you're in this country at this particular time. But yeah, we're not going to do that. So do work in advance, right? And do show that you're going to do something more than kind of observe. You actually have some sort of coherent and engaged research project that you're working on. I mentioned the ARTA, the playlist on the school's YouTube page that will give you a sense of what's been supported in the past. So if you have 18 or 19 hours to spare, you can sit and watch all those videos. You will see, though, I think this is the diversity of places that people go on. It really has been all around the world. And I mean, this past year we have traveled to Zanzibar and Japan and all over Europe. And really looking forward to seeing those proposals or those presentations in January. Like I said, I'd be happy to meet with any of you individually. My last point, and then I can take a couple of questions before we transition to School of Weeks, is that this concept of capstone versus stepping stone messaging and thinking, right? So, like I said, ARTA is not a subsidized vacation. And you could present an ARTA proposal as legitimate, serious capstone experience, right? That builds upon what you've studied and the skills and interests that you have developed at Knowlton. But I think especially as you become more advanced in whatever degree program you're in, or if you're in the graduate program, you need to try and think of and present ARTA as a stepping stone experience for you, ideally, and think about and present what you hope to achieve after you get an ARTA grant and after you travel. So, like how your ARTA experience helps you get to whatever your next goal is. And that could be professional. You may have career aspirations, and this trip will better position you for a particular type of job. It might be educational. You might have a research project here at Knowlton, and this is going to help you work on that project. This might help you apply your graduate program, okay? I don't know what it is, but I think you want to be able to show that you have thought how this experience is going to help you build to something else. And of course, it's going to differ if you're a sophomore or a third-year master's student, right? One of the things it could help prepare the foundation for are other types of grants, like Fulbright. And I think we've, at least one of the Fulbright applicants I know last year had an ARTA and actually came back using an ARTA trip last year to develop a network where he was going to be applying for a Fulbright. So, you know, like I said, I really think that Knowlton students have a unique and interesting academic background, a set of interests, and skills that really do prepare you for not just being successful in things like ARTA, but honestly much more prestigious and impactful experiences like Fulbright, which would send you abroad for an entire year to live and probably will change the direction. Okay, so think broadly. Do you have any specific questions before we turn this over to Louise to talk about Fulbright? Yeah.
Are these for experiences while traveling, such as museum tickets?
No. Yeah, not entry fees and things like that. That doesn't fit under like the travel component. But yeah, good question. That's a legitimate expense. The budget for that is not reimbursed. Any other questions? Yeah.
This is go individual, we can talk about it later, but I'm considering not only study abroad, but maybe also going to like an international conference and also independent research. I have multiple ideas for like academic travel that I'm interested in doing, and my plan for that might not be finalized until later in the spring semester once I know what awards I'm getting. Does it matter if my plans change a little bit from what I put on the ARTA application?
Yes and no, and I think you're right that we probably should have a face-to-face conversation
Okay.
just to figure out the specifics. But you are bringing up a couple of other things. ARTA is for travel for up to 30 days, right? Applications are sometimes 10, 12 days, but you will not advantage yourself as an applicant if you say, oh, I want to go for 6 days or 7 days. That is hard. It's not going to be as substantive a commitment to a research project, right? On the other hand, if you have kind of a summer's worth of experiences you're trying to figure out, let's just talk about it and see how ARTA can work into that. I do think we get people who go abroad and things change, right? You know, they went with a specific idea, there happened to be something else going on, and they got pulled off in some other direction. That's fine. I mean, you're not going to yank your funding because you're not going to publish a paper, you're not going to have to prove that you did exactly everything you said you were going to do for, you don't have to do that for Fulbright either. So yeah, but let's just have a meeting and talk in more detail, okay? More questions? Yeah.
If you apply for a certain period of time and certain dates, and that has to change, is ARTA flexible in supporting change when you go on a trip?
Yeah, I mean, the differences are going to be when you sit down with our fiscal staff and you say, hey, I'm going to go in May, I'm going to go to Amsterdam, I'm going to fly over Rome, and then you realize, oh, I have to change it to July. That could change your costs and things. It does have to occur over the summer, okay? But it's not unusual that people submit a proposal saying, I'm going to leave on this day and return on this day, and it's like 2 weeks later. Don't sweat that as long as you're within the general sort of the same general length of time. But if you propose something and you realize like, oh, there's a conference or there's something going on in that same city a month later, yeah, that would be perfectly logical reason to change your plans. Or maybe you have an internship that wraps up a few weeks later and you realize, yeah.
You had mentioned last year there were some challenges with reimbursement, but is there a time frame that we should expect, like after pre-furniture, when we receive the reimbursement?
That's a very fair question. I'll give you a bad answer, which would be faster than it was this year. And I think the problem this year is you weren't really getting reimbursed. It was going into your OSU account, which is fine if you have things to pay for it. You can use it to pay tuition. Students who have graduated this past year, the money would still go into their OSU account, and then eventually the university would cut them a check and mail it to them with their home address, which is hopefully accurate. That could be a really long process. Here, you will be working directly with our fiscal staff, and the process will be much faster and cleaner. We will also be a part of the process. One of the problems historically is we would submit receipts to the Columbus Foundation and say, can you cut a digital check for this person in this amount? They would do it, but the money never flows through Knowlton. So we didn't see when it happened, or it would go to the bursar's office, and then what would happen, how it would get applied to someone's account. So it was very murky in the past. Set up a meeting with the fiscal staff. You would get reimbursed. Checks get cut within a couple of weeks. It's pretty fast. And then when you come back from the trip, don't wait if you're returning in August. Don't wait until August. Reach out in June when you get back, and we can start processing. We'd rather process it over the summer than you have to deal with it in August when we're dealing with all the other explosions that happen in this building when the academic year starts. Yeah.
You mentioned that the trip has to happen in the summer. Is there specific dates that we're going to come out to?
No. It's just, before the autumn semester starts. And we can play around with that a little bit. We had some situations during COVID where things got shifted around more dramatically. But because the presentations have to happen at a certain time, and those will probably happen historically normally around November, we need all the trips to have been done, wrapped up at the same time. You can't be sort of breaking it out. But also can't delay. Like if you got it this year and said, oh, can I delay until next year? No, you could potentially reapply next year. But you do have to go during just the general summertime, in May. Yeah.
Two questions. First, was an email for you to set up?
Sertion.2, SERSHEN.2. SERSHEN.2. I'm right in the admin suite, right next to the section heads, right next to Curtis Roth's office and Jennifer Clark, and so you can always just hunt me down. I'm at 200G this morning. I'm here every day.
And then the second question, going off of that question, one of the trips that I thought about is in southern South America, where in our summer months it's bitterly cold up there. There'd be any way to shift the timeline of that so that I'm not there when it's bitterly cold?
Probably not. Let's talk. Let's see how, by the way, I'm from northern Minnesota, so it's like bitterly cold. I mean, it's part of the experience. But no, it does have to be, it's always been sort of limited to our summer. And then, it will affect travel to certain parts of the world. So. We do need to hand this over to Louise, so any more questions, again, track me down, I'd be happy to talk to you about ARTA. I love this stuff. I think this is just a fantastic experience, and I'm happy that we have money to hand out and fund your trips. And we'll talk about Fulbright.
Thank you all so much for coming today. Like I said, I'm Louise Edwards. I use she, her pronouns and work in the undergraduate fellowship office. And my colleague is Janet Schrader, who works with me in the office, and she couldn't be here today, but she is great and also happy to help with Fulbright. So I'll introduce the Fulbright program to you and discuss the different types of Fulbright grants. And we're talking a little bit about why you might want to apply to a Fulbright, and also talk a little bit about OSU's Fulbright process. So first of all, what is Fulbright? It is a program that provides grants to go abroad for undergraduates. It's after you graduate from your bachelor's. For graduate students, it can be during your time as a graduate student. They're typically about 1 year long, and you can go to over 140 different countries to research, study, or teach. And there's approximately 2,200 grants annually in all fields of study, so it's a very expansive program. It was originally started by William Fulbright, who introduced a bill to the United States Congress that called for the use of surplus war property to fund the promotion of international goodwill through the exchange of students in the fields of education, culture, and science. And this was in 1945, so essentially after World War II, this was an effort to essentially build better relationships with different countries in the world and the US. And the fundamental principle of Fulbright still stands of international partnership, and that's really the core value of Fulbright, of creating these opportunities for international exchange. And it is a bilateral program in that we work specifically with the US side, where we're sending US students to other countries, but also there's opportunities for people from other countries to come to the US and study and research. The three main types of grants are teaching, research, and study. So the English teaching assistant grants is an opportunity to go abroad for a year and teach English in a different country. The second type of grant is to conduct research. I would say this is the most similar to that ARTA structure, where you're designing your own independent research project and finding a collaborator abroad to design that project with. And then the third option is to study, and this is typically for folks who are interested in getting a master's degree abroad, or potentially a PhD or equivalent, but it funds 1 year of study at a university abroad. And essentially, this is an opportunity for cultural exchange and learning about another country and culture, from working, living, and learning from people of the host country, as well as sharing what it's like to be an American, a US citizen, in all the different ways that can be. And the grant lengths vary slightly. I think some of the shortest ones are maybe around 7 months, and the longest ones are about a year, but generally around a year. And most of them align with the academic year in the US, though some countries who have different academic systems may have slightly different start dates and start in the winter, spring versus summer, fall. But generally, August, September, October are when these grants are starting. These are, for the most part, fully funded. You have your round trip transportation paid for to the host country and back. They cover room, board, incidental costs based on the cost of living in the country, and accident and sickness health benefits. And some other grants also provide kind of language learning, stipends, opportunities to do community work and funding for that. So there's some different aspects of the funding as well, but in general, you're not getting rich off of a Fulbright, but all your living expenses abroad are covered. To be eligible for a Fulbright, you do have to be a US citizen or national and have earned your bachelor's degree or equivalent before the start of the grant period. So usually it's for undergraduates, juniors can start applying towards the end of their junior year to go abroad directly after they graduate. Or seniors can apply to go abroad essentially a year after they graduate. And then graduate and PhD students kind of create their own timeline, but it makes sense within their course of study. Often for kind of thesis or dissertation research, it can be really useful for that. But people have done other stuff too. Each grant has its own set of eligibility requirements and preferences. So some of them do require language skills, some of them don't. Some of them want a particular course of study, especially some of those kind of study master's and PhD programs. And some of them may want specific characteristics, but in general, they're looking for people who are adaptable and flexible, who can both work independently as well as with teams of people, people who are interested in cultural exchange experiences. I talked briefly about the application materials and why you should apply. So the application itself is not too long. It asks for some biographical information in the front, and then there's 3 short answer questions. The first one that asks about your experiences with being flexible and adaptable. The second one asks for how you'll engage with the community abroad. And then the third one asks about the impact of the Fulbright Award. So kind of thinking into the future and how this award will help you with your future professional goals or potentially personal goals as well. So that's kind of similar to that ARTA application as well. And then the statement of grant purpose is the biggest thing you're writing, but it's only 1 or 2 pages. If you're applying for the English teaching grant, it's 1 page. If you're applying to the study research, it's 2 pages. So that's the most extensive writing you're doing, and actually most people find it's harder to get everything in that they want, and that's actually the challenge rather than having enough to say. But essentially you're creating, if you're applying for a research or study grant, you're creating a plan for what you'll do abroad and doing similar things where you're reaching out to people abroad, to professors at universities, and saying, I'm interested in studying with you or researching with you, and creating a proposal from your ideas, but also in collaboration with that person. And if you're doing the ETA, you're kind of describing teaching experiences that you've had in the past and how those will help you abroad. Teaching experience is defined broadly. So some people talk about being camp counselors or TAing for a class or supporting immigrants and refugees. So there's different ways to talk about what teaching experience is. Foreign language forms are applicable to some grants, so if you do need a language, you'll fill out that form. 3 recommendations for any of the grants, and then your transcript. And if you are doing that research award, then you also get a letter from the person you're affiliating with abroad, often at a university, research institution, a professor in one of those places. Why apply? So it's a really great opportunity to build language skills, build cultural skills, and develop a broad experience. It's also time to figure out life plans, especially if you're about to graduate undergrad and trying to figure out what is next. This is a great opportunity to both get some interesting experience and also think about what you might want to do next. And I think also that time abroad often informs what people might do next. So that can be really useful. It's a way to gain teaching, research, or grad school experience and develop professional skills. And it's a way to gain skills for doing something next, whether that might be, there's lots of different pathways here because we present to students all over the university, but grad school, international employment, other kinds of interesting jobs or schooling. And I also find the application process is super useful to students. So even if folks don't get the grant the first time they apply, they often gain really useful skills from the process of applying, from improving writing skills to clarifying their goals, to building connections with mentors both here and abroad, and then gaining skills to apply to other awards. So often folks who have gone through this process are still really grateful to have gone through it, even if they don't get the award, because they're often using parts of that application for other things they're applying to, whether that is jobs or grad school or internships, and often are successful in other areas because of the work they've done on the Fulbright application. I'll talk a little bit about the application process. So like we kind of mentioned in the beginning, there's 2 offices. So I work specifically with undergrad students and alumni, and my email is fellowships@osu.edu. You can get both me and Janet there. Graduate students work with the Office of International Affairs with Joanna, who's also fantastic. We've had great success, both of our offices combined with having students being awarded Fulbrights. So we've been the Fulbright top producer for I think the last 6 years or so. So I would say about a quarter of the students we work with usually win a Fulbright award. So that's a pretty high percentage for a university. If you're interested in applying, the application process starts in the spring or early summer, but we start the application process during Fulbright week, which is usually in late March or early April. And those are combined events with both us and the Office of International Affairs, so there's events for both undergrads and grad students. We don't have the specific dates yet, but I can get you those easily. And then in the summer, you work through your application. So you'll work on drafts of your essays, and we specifically have a very cool 6-week workshop that you can do during the summer if you're an undergraduate student or have graduated with your bachelor's degree. And that is taught by a history professor who has gone on Fulbright grants and also supported a lot of students on Fulbright grants over the years. And he does a really good job of walking through the entire application process with students. So by the end of the workshop, you have a full draft of your application. You don't have to worry about trying to put everything together at the last minute. So I think that's a really useful thing to take part in if you're an undergrad or a recent alum. And for grad students, there's a similar type of workshop series that the Office of International Affairs gives. So similar types of support there. And then we have a campus deadline in mid-August. So this is an opportunity for you essentially to get more feedback on your Fulbright application. We work on the applications with students all over the summer, but by the campus deadline, you're turning in a full draft of your application. This is a non-competitive process, and usually everyone who has a complete draft of their application, we move forward to the national competition. So really this is an opportunity where you meet with 2 or 3 faculty members and they give you feedback on your Fulbright application, and then you have time to revise. It's also an opportunity for us to get information to write an endorsement for you. It's almost like an extra letter of rec that goes into your application and gives some context to who you are and what Ohio State is as a university, and how you fit into Ohio State as an institution. So that's that process, and then you have time to revise the application before the national deadline, which is in early October. We've had several Knowlton students apply to Fulbright as well as other fellowship awards. So I just wanted to acknowledge all the great Knowlton students that we've worked with over the last year. And these are just a few of them, a handful of them. And they worked on lots of different types of fellowships. So Chloe Liu is someone who applied to the Fulbright United Kingdom Summer Institute. So this is kind of a adjacent program to the full Fulbright program that is specifically for first and second year students. So if you are a first or second year student, I highly recommend this program. It's 3 to 4 weeks abroad in the UK. You're taking courses, but also doing a lot of immersive learning in the UK, going to museums, to gardens, to parks, to historical sites. So that was a really cool experience that she got to take part in, and she studied British Cultural Heritage at University of Birmingham, and the application is currently open now. So I'd love to support you on that if you're interested in applying. We also had a student, Caleb Duarte, who applied to the Truman Scholarship, which provides $300,000 toward graduate studies for juniors interested in careers in public policy. That process is still ongoing, so we don't know the results of that, but I thought he put together a really compelling application. And we had several students apply to Fulbright, so Danny Crittenden was one of them, and she had done an ARTA grant previously. I believe it was to Cyprus. Yeah. And then she put together a grant to South Korea for English teaching. I know there's also been grad students who have applied to Fulbright as well this year. So that application to Korea is still pending as well. But these are just kind of a few of the folks that we had worked with, and kind of just to give you a sense of what students in architecture are applying to, and this will be you in the future. If you are interested in learning more about Fulbright, please feel free to take out your phone and scan the QR code here. And that's just a way to give us your email and info, and we'll direct you either to us or to the graduate Office of International Affairs people who support graduate students. And essentially that's just saying, like, you're interested in Fulbright and we're going to give you more information about it. In particular, our Fulbright Week events, which is kind of the kickoff to Fulbright. So please feel free to fill that out. And if you want to learn more about other fellowships beyond Fulbright, there's lots of different opportunities, both abroad and domestically. So you're welcome to also take a look at our website, which is ufo.osu.edu. And I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Fulbright it's like the gold standard of this kind of experience. Truman and Rhodes, and we've heard these names, but it's a really big deal. Another reason to apply is if you get this grant and you're a Fulbrighter, you're part of a community of people who have these in the past, it will be impressive. It is competitive, but if you go to the Fulbright Dear Student website, you look to the country information, there's a lot of data there. There's data there on how many people applied to these grants in the last cycle, how many grants are available. So depending on what you want to try and get, your odds of being successful could be really long. If you want to try to go to the UK for some sort of research grant, or you might look at a country where, gosh, like 40% of the applicants last year got funded because it doesn't get a lot of applicants. Do not self-censor your dreams in this regard. Also, don't assume that a foreign language requirement will matter in a lot of countries. It will matter deeply in some countries. You must have fluency for some countries or be competitive, because so many people would speak Spanish or speak French, for example. But if you want to go to, Netherlands or Denmark or places where English is broadly spoken, it may not matter so much. You can dig around the individual university programs that are available if you want to study a particular topic. You need to spend some time figuring out what your opportunities are, but I think I met with Danny last year, and we just talked about Fulbright. I think his family in South Korea.
She does,
right?
yeah.
But it wasn't something she was thinking of.
Right.
And it's like, but it's a place where a lot of Americans get hired to teach English in South Korea.
Mm-hmm.
A lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little less competitive than some of the other. It's a year-long experience studying in the country where you could also be doing a little bit of supplementary research on the side when you're not teaching. So it's a great, great program. don't imagine that you don't have a chance, because of the resources we have at Ohio State. There are a lot of people who apply for Fulbright on their own, without any support network. You have a real shot at getting it right, if you work with that office or the Office of Financial Affairs. And hopefully we'll have some winners early next year to get started now, so that'll be great.
And happy to help you like figure out what grant to apply, the competitiveness of each grant, all of that. Yeah.
If you're applying to study abroad, like getting a master's abroad, how do you reconcile the Fulbright application and like the university program application? Do you just apply for both and hope that you get accepted for both?
That's a really good question. So yes, you apply for both. If you get a Fulbright but don't get accepted to the university, then unfortunately they can't give you funding. But if you get accepted to the university and don't get a Fulbright, then you can think about, are there alternative ways to fund this? So we've had students do that before, where they've gotten into really incredible master's programs, but then not gotten a Fulbright and figured out kind of other external funding they can use. Or sometimes the university itself that you've applied to will give you scholarship money. So there's kind of different ways to navigate that, but I also always tell people to like apply for other things that are beyond Fulbright too.
Can you apply for multiple universities and programs and sort of mention all of those on your Fulbright, and then I will choose among the ones that I get accepted to?
So you can only apply to one Fulbright grant per year, but you can keep on applying every year.
Like one grant can only go to like one university that you like call out in the application.
And that depends on the application. So there's certain study grants that will let you like list your top 3 choices, or will say something like that. And there's some that are like, you need to choose one place and write that in the application. So there's some thinking through that too, to think about like, what programs are you excited about, which ones do you want the funding for? There's some negotiating there of what you're applying for and which university you're putting with the Fulbright grant. But that's also we can talk through as well. Yeah. Yes.
I think that like sometimes when you want to do like research in another country, you'll need like a recommendation letter from like the university you want to collaborate with. I think my question is like, is this something you have to like network by yourself or like expose to? So do you at like the office like international affairs like have connections in other countries that like you can potentially point students to? Or is that like you gotta like figure out who you're gonna connect with there?
It's a little bit of a combination of both of those things. Sometimes depending on who we've worked with before or if we know the university, we can sometimes connect you to someone. Sometimes it's also a matter of just like asking your advisors and professors to say like, who are you connected with abroad? There's also past faculty at OSU who have won Fulbright, so you can see like who they work with abroad. So that can be a nice connection. So there's ways we can help you get started, but sometimes also it's cold emailing, and we've also had students do that successfully where they're cold emailing a bunch of people and someone will get back to them, and that actually happens quite often. I think people don't realize that that's the way you can make connections, but it works out quite a bit actually.
Fulbright is a recognized name across the globe in the undergraduate countries, so they'll know why you're reaching out.
Yeah.
Our students spend a lot of time in this building, tethered to Knowlton Hall. The resources of this campus and there are area study centers that bring together faculty from all around campus that are focused on different parts of the world. So I think, yeah, building a network here at Ohio State and setting up some interviews with faculty outside of Knowlton might be informative as well as you're trying to make connections.
So am I correct to understand that as long as you have a bachelor's, you can apply to a Fulbright whenever, like years after you graduated, potentially?
Correct, yeah. So essentially the limitations are if you, you have to have a bachelor's at the start of the grant, and then you can apply for the U.S. student program all the way up until you earn your PhD. So there's a lot of time there, and then even after you earn your PhD, there's other scholar and faculty grants to apply for, so it's never ending.
Would those OSU resources be available to me, like if I applied years after?
Yeah, so we work with alumni. We're happy to work with alumni who have, graduated several years ago. If you started a grad program, we usually recommend you work with that grad school because they usually just are better equipped to support you because you're a grad student there. But as long as you haven't started a grad program, we're happy to support anyone.
Well, I'm actually a grad student
Oh,
now, so
okay.
if I applied for a Fulbright like a couple of years from now, who should I contact? People that I like currently know in my grad program?
So if you were applying, that's a good question. I would contact Joanna probably.
Yeah.
Who's email.
Right.
Yeah, she works with grad students, and yeah, she would be able to point you in the right direction. Okay. Yeah.
We out of energy?
Maybe an unusual question. For area students who are interested in Fulbright opportunities, are there ways that you can kind of move together as a couple?
There are, many of the grants support dependents. So they actually give you an additional stipend to support your spouse coming with you abroad. And there's also sometimes stipends for children as well. So you kind of have to look at the grant description and see which grants support, give that type of support and which don't. But many of them do. And even if they don't, you can sometimes figure out ways for your spouse to get, the visa through a different role. So that's something that people do as well. Yeah.
So we'll share this information and do try to register if you have any interest in this at all. Take part in the Fulbright week. And we'll try to publicize internally when that gets scheduled as well. So take part. And then fingers crossed that we have some Knowlton winners.
Yeah, I have my fingers crossed as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.